Hi, today I'm looking at an alternative to the premium flagship smartphones. This is the Nothing Phone 3A. So, if it's not premium, what is it? Well, it's probably what we'd class a mid-range phone. In Australia, it costs $689. A premium smartphone tends to cost 2 or 3 times that amount, often up around about $2,000. So, given it's not a premium smartphone, it's a mid-range phone, what do we actually lose, and does it really matter? Let's find out. I'm going to power it on, which takes a while, doesn't it? Press and hold the power button. Feel it kicking into life, and now the phone will boot up. Usual pixelated text that nothing like to use. I have been using smartphones ever since the first iPhone in 2007, and before that I used PDAs, digital assistants, remember them? The Palm Pilot with its graffiti input method, the Palm Trio, the BlackBerry with their small keyboards. However, since 2007, as I say, since the original iPhone was launched, I've used smartphones. Apple for the first few years, but then in the last few years I've jumped ship and I've started using Android phones more and more. I'll admit I nearly always buy the top of the range flagship models. I just like the best of each if I can. However, a viewer of my channel said they don't want to spend that kind of money on a phone. So I started to do a bit of research. I looked around, I read reviews, I saw on YouTube reviews, and one of the ones that sort of jumped out at me anyway was the Nothing Phone 3A. This was launched in March this year and stood out to me as a phone that seems to offer reasonable specifications for a reasonable price. It has a 6.77 inch, call it 6.8 inch AMOLED screen with a resolution of 1080 by 2392, which gives us 387 pixels per inch. The screen has a 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. The front of the screen is protected by Panda Glass. Panda Glass is a Chinese Gorilla Glass alternative. From some of the reviews I've read, it's not quite as good as Gorilla Glass, but it's still a toughened glass screen to help protect the front of the phone. It has a peak brightness of 1300 nits and typical brightness of 800 nits. So that is another area where perhaps it's not as good as some of the top of the range flagship phones. Some of these go up now to 4,000 nits of peak brightness, and they have typical brightness of the 1600 nits. It has Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.4, an NFC chip for tap-to-pay payments, GPS for your mapping, and dual stereo speakers. It weighs 208 grams, so reasonably lightweight for the size. It feels reasonably lightweight, particularly given the size of it. The phone contains a Qualcomm Snapdragon 7S Gen 3, which is a capable 4nm chip. It's not going to be as powerful as the latest Snapdragon 8 Elite, for example, but it's still a reasonable chip. The phone has 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage, this particular version I have here, and that costs $689 in Australia. You cannot get one with a larger storage, so 256 gigabytes is it. You can, however, get one with smaller. So there is one that just has 128 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes of RAM. The list price for that is $599. However, I've looked on Amazon and you can find it there for $524. So if you want to save a bit more money, maybe that's an option. The phone has a 5000 milliamp hour battery, so a decent sized battery, and it has 50 watt wired charging. Unfortunately, it does not support wireless charging, so again, one of the things you lose out on. It has a rating of IP64, so the 6 indicates it's dust tight, and the 4 that it will resist water splashes, so it's not waterproof. So you don't really want to be dropping this one in the water in the sea or something like that. Again, the flagship phones, they tend to be IP68 or 69, so they're much more resistant to water. It has 3 cameras on the rear of the phone. It has a 50 megapixel main camera, a 15 megapixel telephoto, 2 times optical up to 30 times digital, although the 30 times digital it starts to get a bit blurry at that level. So it has a front camera with 32 megapixel camera for selfies, pinhole camera at the top here. Some other features of the phone that tend to stand out. It has good tactile vibration. It feels good and responds when you're using the keyboard or touching bits on the screen. In-screen optical fingerprint scanner for security. It runs Nothing OS 3.1, which is based on Android 15. Now, Nothing provide up to 3 years of Android updates and 6 years of security updates. So again, an area where they're not quite up there with the flagship phones from Google, Apple, Samsung, which all tend to support 7 years of operating system updates. One of the unique features for the phone, although I start to see this on a few other phones now, it has a key on the side here. This is referred to as the essential key. It's their AI key, and it links to the essential space, which is an area on the phone that stores information for you. Now, a single press of that will do a screen capture. A long press will allow you to record a note. All of that information is secured securely on the device. However, you can't access it anywhere else. So you can't, for instance, go onto your computer and access the same information if you want to. I'm not as keen on that because I like to be able to take a note on my phone, but I like to be able to access it on my tablet, on my PC and other places. But if you want to use it, it's there. Another standout feature for Nothing phones are the Glyph interface on the back. That's these lights around the camera module. They allow you to place your phone face down while you're in a meeting. That will silence it if you've got flip the shush switched on. But you can still get notified by those lights on the back when you get messages, maybe WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, etc. You can also use them for a visual countdown. So if you've got an Uber on its way, one of the lights will slowly go down as the Uber gets closer. You can set it up so when different contacts call you, different lights light up in a different sequence. So, for example, if my wife calls, that's an important call to me, I want to know, and that shows me. You can also sync the lights when you're playing music, if that's your thing, like being in a discotheque. It also gives you a visual indication of the phone's volume. So as you change the volume level, the light will go up and down. So it's quite useful for silencing a phone in the meeting and then still getting some sort of visual indication. One of the things I do want to call out about the Nothing phones that I think is quite good, when you swipe up to access the app drawer, Nothing breaks the apps into different categories. So we have utilities, social, entertainment, productivity, travel, multimedia, education, games, lifestyle, finance, shopping, etc. I quite like that. That is the way Apple does it on their phone, so they've copied Apple in that respect. Another thing that's unique on this phone compared to stock Android is when you pull down, the quick settings can be resized. So you can modify the size of the settings and take little or more space depending on what your requirements are. In the essential space, you can see some previous screenshots and notes that I've made, and it's stored them in the essential space. But as I say, I've found that I've been using the phone for about a month now and I don't really use it. I prefer using something like Keep Notes. The back of the phone, I think, looks rather nice, rather lovely. I haven't put a case on it. One, because I really don't want to cover up the glyphs, because that's one of the features of the phone. I understand you can actually get cases for this that will cover and leave the glyph showing, but I haven't obtained one of those. To be honest, I just like the look of the phone a lot, so I don't particularly want to cover it even with a case that shows the glyphs. The risk is obviously a little bit slippery. In day-to-day use, browsing the internet, responding to emails and messages, the phone is absolutely fine. It's very good. When it comes to some areas, it just feels a little bit slower than some of the flagship phones I'm used to. Just the scrolling around, the moving around the interface. It's not dramatic, but it is noticeable compared to some phones with a faster CPU and GPU. That essential key, which I've mentioned, I wish they'd programmed it slightly different. The annoying thing for me is I keep pressing it by mistake. It's here on the side under the power key. So the volume keys are the other side. And the trouble is I keep reaching up and pressing the essential key by mistake. I wish what they'd done was make it so that it wasn't just a single press to access the screenshot. You maybe double press for a screenshot and then a long hold to record a note. Just a small thing, but it's a little bit on the annoying side, shall we say. Photos from the phone are not bad. Again, they're not as good as you'll get out of a Google Pixel or a Samsung Galaxy phone or an Apple iPhone, but they're quite serviceable. I've taken a few shots with it and I've not been disappointed. So, in summary, this is only a short review, I'm just having a look at it quickly. It is definitely good value for money. You get a lot of phone for the price you pay. Nothing phones are also a little bit different, a bit unique. If you don't need a flagship phone, and many people don't, then get it. You won't be disappointed. If you've been spoilt by flagship devices, as I have, you may be left wanting. I've got used to the speed of the interface and the features, but it still nagged me a little bit, if you like. I used it, as I said, for a full month, but in the end, I wanted that premium flagship experience, so I've gone back to using my OnePlus 13 as my daily driver. So in closing, it's not the kind of phone I normally review, especially as I buy every device I look at. I've been pleasantly surprised by the Nothing Phone 3A. It's a lot of phone for the money, it's just not for me. I usually look at more premium devices, so please take a look at some of my other videos if you'd like. And if you're able to, please like and subscribe this video. It helps me try and build my channel a little bit. I'm very new at this and I'm slowly but certainly getting better. Well, maybe that's not for me to say, but I feel like I'm getting better, a little bit more comfortable, shall we say, in day-to-day and using it. So once again, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it.